The sound of chainsaws echoed through Maplewood Estates on what should have been an ordinary morning. But for one man, that sound would change everything, destroying his sanctuary, igniting a legal war, and ending with a twist no one in the neighborhood could have predicted. This is the story of how one HOA's arrogance turned into a $1.4 million mistake, and how the man they tried to control ended up owning their land. David Harrison's backyard was his pride. Towering oaks and maples shaded his home, offering privacy, beauty, and the sound of birds that reminded him of his childhood summers. But one morning, as he pulled into his driveway after a quick errand, that peace was shattered. Chainsaws buzzed in the distance. His stomach dropped. He sprinted to his backyard and froze. Contractors in neon vests were cutting down his trees. 15 of them. Limbs cracked, leaves fell, trunks thudded against the ground. Years of growth and beauty vanished before his eyes. "Stop! What are you doing?" David yelled, his voice shaking. "Orders from the HOA." One worker muttered without even looking up. David's hands trembled. The HOA. Of course. They had sent countless letters over the years. "Your mailbox is the wrong shade. Your grass is half an inch too tall." But this was destruction. By the time the chainsaws stopped, David's backyard was stripped bare. Stumps remained where once there had been shade and songbirds. His sanctuary was gone. That evening, David stormed into the HOA office. The president, Margaret Lowe, sat behind her desk with a smug expression. "You destroyed my property," David snapped, slamming a photo of his ruined yard in front of her. Margaret didn't flinch. "We improved it. Your trees blocked views, sunlight, and hurt property values. The board voted. On my land." David's voice cracked with fury. She leaned back, smirking. "You'll thank us someday." David clenched his fists. "No, I'll see you in court." Margaret laughed softly. "Good luck with that." That night, as David stared at the stumps from his kitchen window, grief turned into determination. They thought they had power. They thought he'd back down. But they were wrong. David met with lawyers the next morning. He laid out photos, arborist reports, and estimates of the tree's value. Each oak and maple wasn't just wood. It was property, worth thousands apiece. The lawyers nodded. He had a strong case. Trespassing, property destruction, emotional damages. The HOA had gone too far. Word spread quickly through Maplewood Estates. Neighbors whispered at mailboxes, shocked by the sight of David's stripped yard. Some supported him quietly. Others feared the HOA. But David didn't care. He had one goal: justice. The lawsuit was filed, and the HOA responded arrogantly. Their legal team argued the trees were unsightly and blocked neighborhood uniformity. They claimed the board acted in the best interest of all homeowners. But as discovery began, David's lawyer uncovered emails that changed everything. The HOA had never received official complaints. Margaret and 2 board members had simply wanted an unobstructed view of the nearby hills from their upstairs windows. They had voted in private, without notice, without authority. David sat in the lawyer's office, his jaw tight. "So they destroyed my property for a view?" The lawyer nodded grimly. "And that makes your case even stronger." For the first time since that morning, David felt a spark of hope. The trial drew a crowd. Neighbors filled the benches, curious to see David face the HOA. Margaret entered the courtroom in a tailored suit, her chin high, as if confident victory was inevitable. David sat quietly beside his lawyer, holding a photo of his old backyard. The HOA's attorney spoke first, painting David as unreasonable, a homeowner who refused to comply with rules that kept Maplewood Estates beautiful. He claimed the trees were hazardous and decreased property values. But David's lawyer rose with calm precision. He showed before and after photos. He brought in an arborist who testified each tree was healthy and worth thousands. He revealed the HOA's private emails, proof they acted out of personal desire, not safety or community benefit. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lawyer told the jury, "this isn't about trees. This is about rights. If an HOA can trespass, destroy, and call it improvement, then no homeowner is safe." Margaret's confident smirk began to fade. The defense tried to recover, claiming the HOA bylaws gave them broad authority. But under cross-examination, Margaret cracked. "Did you have unanimous approval?" The lawyer pressed. "No," she admitted. "Did you notify Mr. Harrison?" "No." "Then you trespassed, destroyed his property, and did so for your personal gain." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The jury saw through her. David's lawyer presented damages. $400,000 for the tree's appraised value, plus punitive damages for trespassing and emotional distress. The HOA's attorney objected, but the judge allowed it. David glanced at Margaret. For once, her eyes avoided his. The jury deliberated only 3 hours. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, David Harrison. Damages awarded, $1.4 million. Gasps filled the room. David closed his eyes, relief washing over him. Margaret sat frozen, her face pale. But the HOA didn't have $1.4 million in cash. To satisfy the judgment, they were forced to sell assets. Their offices, common lands, and even properties owned by the association went up for liquidation. And when the dust settled, David had the chance to buy. He signed the papers with steady hands. The land once controlled by the HOA now belonged to him. The neighborhood buzzed with shock. The man the HOA once bullied now owned their land. Some residents cheered privately, tired of the board's tyranny. Others feared what this meant for Maplewood Estates. David, however, wasn't cruel. He didn't flaunt his victory. He didn't evict anyone or impose new rules. He simply rebuilt. He hired landscapers, planted new trees, and watched life return to his yard. It would take years for them to grow tall, but every sapling was a symbol. He had stood his ground and won. Neighbors who once whispered began to nod at him respectfully. Even those who'd sided with the HOA now saw the truth. David had fought not just for himself, but for everyone's rights. Months later, David walked past the old HOA office, now his property. The blinds were gone, the walls freshly painted. Where once Margaret had smirked with power, now the building stood silent. People still talked about the case. About how one man turned an HOA's arrogance into their downfall. About how the quest for better views cost them everything. David never gloated. He didn't need to. Every time he looked out at his backyard, at the saplings swaying in the wind, he smiled. The HOA had taken his trees. But in their arrogance, they gave him something far greater: freedom, and ownership of the very land they once ruled. They wanted a clear view of the hills. What they got instead was a clear view of their own downfall.